Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Her Hoop Stats podcast. I'm Chelsea Leite, joined again by Richard Cohen of Her Hoop Stats, of course, and we are going to dive into some of the week's hot topics, but in a different kind of format. So, if you follow Richard on Blue Sky, he's a great follow for fun facts and like very niche rules and contract things, and like truly anytime I'm confused about something that's going on, Richard usually I don't know what we're called, posts on Blue Sky. I was about to say tweets, but
Some people
it's
have
Blue
called them
Sky.
skeets, but yeah, I don't think it's
Oh,
quite caught on yet.
yeah, exactly.
So
So
just posts
posts
works, yeah.
posts on Blue Sky. But so yeah, we this is gonna be like part mailbag, part frequently asked questions, because as the W grows every year, rules change, contract stuff changes, and obviously people are a little bit confused because there's just been so much going on at the beginning of the season, and who better to answer our questions than Richard? So let's start with a few of the frequently asked questions that you got on your Blue Sky. You kind of said, like, hey, like, ask me things about the contracts and whatever if you have questions. And people obviously, ask the questions. So the one thing I want to start off with is, we have these injuries in the WNBA, right? And you think about players like Benajelani Hamilton, you think about players like Nika Mule, Jordan Horston, and they were suspended by their teams because they were injured. They're not going to be able to play this season. And so the teams are able to suspend them, take their salary off of the salary cap, and then be able to sign more players while still keeping those players, the rights to those players on the team. Then there's another kind of subsection of player, the Georgia Amores, the Katie Lou Samuelsons, where they got injured technically before the season started. But when you look at reports like personnel reports, injury reports before every game, they're still listed on the personnel report. They're still technically on the roster, and their salary still counts towards the roster if you're like looking at it on like our Herb Stats cap sheets. So what is the difference between, say, like Nika Mule Benajelani kind of contract situation and the Katie Lou Samuelson, Georgia Amore, where they're still on the books?
Right. Well, the key difference to start with between all of these is that Laney Hamilton, Mule, and Horston all got hurt playing in other leagues for other teams.
Mhm.
Samuelson and Amore both got hurt, even though it wasn't during games or during the regular season, while providing their services to their WNBA team. They were already in camp, they were already with the team, and then they got hurt.
Mhm.
So when you get hurt overseas, or now it's often not overseas because we have other leagues in the US, when you
Yeah.
get hurt in another league, then teams can take a lot more routes to dealing with that, such as the full season suspensions that we saw with Horston and Mule, and then with Laney Hamilton, which
Yeah.
takes the player off the cap entirely. It then means the roster spot opens up as well, and yeah, you can basically remove them from the calculations. With Samuelson and with Amore, they're
Mhm.
both on the cap. They're both taking up a roster spot for the rest of the season. They're slightly different situations because Amore could have been cut,
Mm.
um, but obviously, having taken her with the 6th overall pick, Washington didn't want to, and especially as it's a sort of rebuilding season for Washington, or it was supposed to be before they started 2-0. They can afford to play with a player short and work that out this season. And if it leads to one or two more losses than they would have had otherwise, it's not a huge deal. But Seattle, because it was not a training camp contract,
Mm.
that they have to pay out a player who gets hurt until they would be healthy to play again.
Mm.
And however much they pay that out then also counts against the cap.
Mm.
So with Samuelson basically tearing her ACL, that would be the whole of her contract, which is $90,000 this year. So
Yep.
they couldn't cut her and still have enough cap room to keep an 11th player that wasn't her on the roster. So they
Mhm.
therefore essentially had to keep her unless they were going to do what I suggested in training camp, which was trade her to Golden State for something. But that would
Yeah.
have taken a pick in order to get Golden State to do the deal. So there would have been cost involved as well on top of that.
Yeah, and then, like, yeah, it's, different situations, obviously, because, Katie Lou Samuelson is a little bit of an older player, Georgia Amore hasn't technically made her WNBA, debut yet, so, like, she's more of, like, a prospect for Washington, and then there's also the fact that, like, once these teams go under 10 players, and I'm pretty sure that, like, Amore and Katie Lou Samuelson count towards that, they can start signing hardship contracts. Is that right?
Yes, with like small caveats. No, the hardship rules are complicated because they're
Mhm.
not all in the CBA,
Yeah,
which is something they need to fix with the next CBA, but we'll see whether they do or not.
yeah.
Um, we have this giant document, collective bargaining agreement, which is public, which you can go and download from the Players Association. But there is also another very long document called the Operations Manual, which is an internal document no one's ever been willing to provide me with a full copy of. I've seen extracts over the years,
Mhm.
um, which basically sort of governs things, sort of smaller rules, smaller intricacies for all of the teams if they come across a situation and have to deal with it. So hardships aren't quite as simple as they seem in the CBA, but basically, yes, when you get two extended injuries, or especially if it's an 11-player roster that then drops under 10 who are actually physically available to play, teams will be eligible for a hardship to sign an extra player, which is what LA have already done because they
Y
have Brink and Burrell and did have
Yes.
Alamond out.
Yeah, and okay, so that's a great transition to where I wanted to go next because LA signed, Liatu King to a what they're calling a rest of season hardship contract, and
Yep.
so a lot of people have been confused about that verbiage, and obviously it's just like contract lingo, but you kind of came up and were like, "Okay, like, she's not technically guaranteed for the rest of the season." So kind of go into the rest of season hardship contract and what that means for King and for the LA Sparks.
Yeah, it's basically a procedural term. She has technically signed a deal that the value of it is as if she will be playing for them until the end of the season.
Yeah.
But the hardship player has to be released as soon as the team no longer qualifies for the hardship. So
Mhm.
once Burrell or Brink return from their injury,
Mhm.
King will be released. So even though it's called a rest of season hardship, invariably, apart from on rare occasions, the player will not actually be there for the rest of the season, even though that's what they're calling it. People tend to get confused because they think that means Burrell must have blown out her knee and is gone for the rest of the year, and that's why they're getting to sign someone on a rest of season deal. But yeah, it's just the term they use, and it complicates things. Once we get to
Yeah,
the second half of the season, they become seven-day deals when you sign a
yeah.
hardship, and then people get less confused.
Yeah, because the idea I'm assuming behind it is that like you can't keep her for the whole season. There's no 7-day limit or whatever on it.
Yep.
If say like Burrell's injury was extended and she wasn't able to come back before the end of the
Yep.
season, you just kind of have that guarantee that you have King signed and she's not going through like the 7-day process that will start with, obviously when it comes to Eurobasket, when it comes to injuries later in the season in the second half of the season. Um but yeah, so people, and obviously it is confusing. Like it's
Yep.
confusing verbiage, and especially when it's hard to see like who is guaranteed, who's not, and then you have people like Katie Lou Samuelson, who technically, if you look on her hoop stats cap sheet, technically she's not showing up as guaranteed. But
Yep.
then because she got injured, now she's technically guaranteed. It's a whole thing. Um, the other thing that I wanted to get into because it's come up quite a lot in the past week's games is fouls. We're seeing a ton of fouls. I don't know if that's just like, people are spicy to start the season or if it's just, I don't know, the spirit of Diana Taurasi just kind of like wafting over the entire league. But there's been lots of fouls, there's been lots of technical fouls, and I think every year we kind of gain a lot more fans from the college space, and fouls is something that like the rule changes in the NCAA are quite different um from the WNBA. So like the biggest thing off the bat is that in college you get fouled out with 5 fouls. In the WNBA you get fouled out with 6 fouls, so you get an extra foul. Um And then the other thing in the WNBA is that you can get technical fouls, and there's also a limit of technical fouls that you can get before you get suspended for, I think it's 1 game. Um, and then you come back obviously and whatever, but you get like a higher fine. So every technical foul you get, if you didn't know, you get fined. In the WNBA it's not as much as the NBA, but you get fined, you pay. Yeah, you pay. And at least in the NBA, then they take that money and they like give it to charity and stuff. So it's, at the end of the day, like, I kind of wish they gave it to me, but what can you do? Imagine they like took all the technical fouls and just like paid it out to the media.
I,
um
I, I think you'll struggle to get that one passed as a
Yeah,
rule. Yeah.
CBA, NECA, I have a pitch. But yeah, so last year, the limit was 7, and before we started recording, you let us know that you were kind of like parsing through the rules, and because the WNBA has the right to change the rules every year, like they can do that, and they've changed it now so that it's 8 technical fouls before you get that 1 game suspension. Um, and that can, like, the 1 game suspension can happen anytime. So, like, last year, for example, Caitlin Clark was kind of like at almost at the limit. And if she would have gotten that last technical foul, she would have missed the Fever's first playoff game, which obviously would have
No,
been detrimental. No?
no. There's a caveat to the rules that they added when that happened to Tiffany
Yeah.
Hayes many
Okay.
years ago. But
Oh,
no, if you go over the limit in the final regular season game, you still get fined, but you don't
okay.
miss the first playoff game.
Wow, Twitter did me dirty on that one. Because people were like, "She's gonna miss the game." So thank you, Richard. That's why you're here. But yeah, but now they changed it up to 8 instead of 7, which you confirmed before. Which, I mean, Diana Taurasi's probably like shaking her fist somewhere on a beach, being like, I could have used that extra one." But yeah, like, how did you find that?
The media website for the league and for the NBA as well occasionally updates the list of technical fouls, and sort of so you get sort of information on whether any of them have been rescinded and things like that, and just
Yeah,
details on how many each player has. And at the bottom of that, they have details on when the suspensions kick in and sort of how much each one costs. And yeah, when I was researching for this podcast, I noticed that they've changed the details on the bottom of the page.
do
And given
tell.
how much of the writing they've changed, it doesn't look like it's a typo for once, which it often is
Yeah,
when this league changes something.
yeah.
So yeah, it looks like, if anyone wants to know the fines, technical fouls 1 to 3 are $200 each. Technical
Okay.
fouls 4 to 7 are $400 each,
Mm.
and then technical foul 8 is $800 plus that 1 game suspension when you hit it. And
Yep.
then there's also a suspension for the 10th, the 12th, the 14th, and so on if you keep picking them up. But
Dang.
by that point, you really should have stopped yelling back at the refs
Yeah,
or kicking balls
exactly.
into the stands or whatever you're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah, and I mean, we're seeing technical. There was a lot of technical fouls this weekend. Shakira Austin has played 3, no, 4,
Two
whatever. How many
games,
in 2
two
games? She
games,
has
three
3.
techs. Yeah,
Yeah, so I was trying to think of how many games they had done total. 3 games, 3 techs. Technically, she only made the techs in the last 2 games because, yeah. But anyway, she already has 3, so she's paid her 3 $200 fines. Next time the price is gonna go up. For comparison, I'm pretty sure the NBA is like 2,500 every time you get a tech. So it's definitely different, obviously, to
yeah.
make
They
for
got
the
more zeros
salary.
on their
They got
paycheck,
more.
so
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. They're good. They're fine. Um, Aaliyah Boston got a tech over the weekend, but Caitlin Clark has offered to pay for it for her, because she was shocked that she got it, and maybe Caitlin thought that she was like,
Yeah.
maybe I should have gotten it, so she's gonna pay
Um,
it for her.
I'm pretty
Um,
sure they take these things directly out of the paycheck before, like, it gets sent to the player's bank account. So it's pretty performative whenever anyone says,
yeah,
I'll pay
yeah,
your fine."
she'll probably just buy her a nice gift or something. I don't know, or
Yeah.
like get her dinner or something. But anyways, yeah, and then who else? There was Marina Mabrey got a tech, I'm pretty sure.
Well, that's pretty
Um,
common.
yeah, I mean, true. I Okay, a few years ago I was in like a pool, and the whole part of the pool was like who was gonna get the most techs of the season. And I'm pretty sure I voted Diana Taurasi, and I forget who beat her by
It's
like
a
one
safe bet
tech.
usually, yeah.
Yeah, usually a safe bet, right? But And like this makes me think now, like back to the NCAA finals when Diana Taurasi was like talking about her retirement and whatever on her and Sue Bird's cast. And the one part that made me laugh so hard was when she was describing all the things she used to do when she would get ejected. So she got ejected a lot in her 20-year career, but if you didn't see that, some of the things that she did, like one time she asked the security guard. So basically, when you get ejected, you just have to go back to the locker room. You're not allowed to sit on the bench. You're not allowed to come back out, and you watch the game from the locker room. So she said one time she asked the security guard to get her a gin and tonic. He did. He got her a gin and tonic, and she drank a gin and tonic while she watched the rest of the game. She said another time, and Sue Bird provided the actual screenshot of it, but one time she took her phone and took a selfie in the locker room by herself and sent it to a group chat that they had. And the caption was just "got tossed." Iconic. She said another time she like got changed, I guess, into like regular clothes, and she snuck back out into the stands and watched the rest of the game from the stands, which is so good.
You would think she would be too recognizable to get away with
Right?
that. Yeah.
Like out of all places to recognize a women's basketball player like Diana Taurasi would be in the arena that she just got kicked out of. But you know,
Mm.
whatever. Maybe they're just like, we're gonna pretend not to see her. But yeah, just like so that just made me think about it because like she's just like the tech queen, the like, she was just so iconic for having those moments. Oh, the other one that would make me laugh is when I think this was during the bubble, but she got into it with a ref and she was like, meet me in the lobby after
The
the
hobby is
game.
legendary at this point.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure she once got a tech for she was getting all up in Simona Gus's face and she just like kissed her on the cheek. Like what a
I
menace.
I
I
think
don't know
she
if she
might have already gotten the tech by that point, but yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
in each other's faces, and the way Diana describes it, like, on these, like, casts or podcasts or whatever, is that she was, like she was mad, and she kinda got up but her and Simone Augustus are really close, and she got up there, and she just, like, was like, "Oh, I love you," and just, like, gave her a kiss on the cheek, but it's so funny to watch because it's just, like, she's such a menace. But anyway, so Diana Taurasi's shaking her fist somewhere in Cabo being like, "Why didn't I get my extra tech?"
I mean,
But
I call it the Tarasi line, the
yeah.
limit that players have to get to
Oh,
get that suspension each year. And yeah, they pushed it up one. So
yeah, they
it's
in
in
her
her honor. Now,
honor.
now that she's gone, everyone else gets an
Yeah,
extra tech to play with. Yeah.
exactly, in her honor. Pour one out for Taurasi. And the funny part is I saw another post this week because Paige Becker's obviously started in the league and last night's game she was kind of chirping back and forth to the ref saying like somebody was traveling and people kind of took that and was like, oh, like the spirit of Diana Taurasi lives on in Paige Becker's. So yeah, just like the idea around technical fouls, I mean, the fine part of it is interesting because a lot of times the texts sometimes are weak, but I'm not gonna say much more about that. They can do what they want. But yeah, they do get an extra one this year, which is an interesting, extra bit of I don't know rules to the game. So if you didn't know that, that happened. But yeah, and was there anything else that people were like that was like a big theme when people were asking you questions in your blue sky?
I mean, there's a few things I've been talking about recently. The waiver period came up because
Mm,
obviously a lot of players get cut at the end of camp.
yep.
Um, this time of year, it's 48 hours, so everyone who was cut in camp has cleared at this point,
Yeah.
which means just for anyone who doesn't understand what waivers are, which is entirely understandable if you don't follow all of this nonsense. When a player gets cut who's under contract, they're placed on waivers, and any other team can claim that player over the waiver period that follows.
Mhm.
If any team does claim them, then the contract that was in place before the player was cut continues to exist. You just assume the exact same contract. You don't get to come up with a new deal or re-sign them
Yeah.
or anything like that. You just take on the same deal as if they'd been traded, essentially. Um, it's happened once or twice this year. Amahir got claimed by Toronto before she was then cut as well.
Toronto.
Oh, sorry, not Toronto, by Golden State
Yeah,
before
I
she
was
was.
like, I don't think
Yeah,
we had
I,
any players in,
I,
but
I'm moving on to the next expansion
yeah,
team rather than the
exactly.
current one.
You're predicting what may happen.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Grace
Yeah, me
Berger was
neither.
claimed by Minnesota.
Yeah.
and then got cut as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
now that they've cleared waivers, those contracts don't exist, and all those players are unrestricted free
Free
agents.
agents. Yeah, and then they
Um,
can so even, like, when it comes to rookies, like Cheyenne Sellers, for example, she signs her rookie contract, she gets waived by Golden State, picked up on waivers by Atlanta, waived by Atlanta, clears waivers, so when she resigns, she won't resign on a rookie contract, she'll resign on, like, on a minimum?
yeah, well,
Yeah.
technically she could could now sign for anything from the minimum to the maximum, but
Yeah,
in very obviously having
yeah,
been cut off a rookie scale contract, she will almost certainly, if she gets another deal, sign on a minimum contract. Yeah,
yeah.
the rookie scale deal, that the sort of 3 years plus a team option for the fourth, is gone now for all of these players who were waived and have
Or
cleared.
yeah, because obviously, yeah, that's like it's more money for teams, obviously, because if you're drafted, you get that extra nod of money. And another thing that I think people don't realize is like where you get drafted also plays a part in how much money you get paid. So like one picks 1 to 4 get more money than the fifth pick. So like if you're picked fourth, you get more money than you would if you got picked fifth. And it's the same thing in the NBA too. Like it's a scale. You can go on and like go online and look at what exactly it's not too much money, but like it is more. So yeah, just another little like technical thing about like we do say like I mean draft place doesn't matter too much, but at the end of the day, you do get a little bit more money if you're drafted higher.
Yeah, there's five sort of sections of different payment scales
Hmm.
for rookies in this: 1 to 4, then
Yeah,
5 to 8, then the rest of the first round, because
yeah,
obviously it's not now just another 4 picks because we've got extra teams.
yeah,
Then the second round gets slightly less, and then the third round gets the same as what the minimum for their first year.
yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, there's
yeah,
five levels, and I think in the NBA it's more sort of pick by pick. It scales down one after the other. I wouldn't be
yeah,
surprised if they change that in the next CBA for the
yeah.
WNBA as well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, yeah, the NBA is a little different. It's only 2 rounds, there's just different things going on. But um yeah, okay. So let's kind of transition now to we have some actual questions that people asked. We tweeted or posted out on her hoop stats for people to ask some questions. Um the first one, let's just start with this one because it'll make a very special listener out there very happy. Our producer Brian's mom asked this question, so shout out to her. But so I'm going to ask you, what is the difference between a transition take foul and a clear path foul?
Right. I looked this up just to make sure I had it right in my head before
Yep.
talking about this. Basically, the transition take foul is the easier one to call and to commit. If there's a transition opportunity for a team who just gained possession of the ball, or right after the turnover, and a player on the other team grabs them, and with there's the rule does say no play on the ball. That is the
Mhm.
phrasing they actually use. Then it's a transition take foul. They It's usually called when you sort of when you don't really make a proper defensive play. You just sort of grab the other player, and it results in one free throw, which can be taken by any player on the team,
Yeah.
and possession.
Yeah.
It also says under the listing for the wording of a transition take foul, it does not meet the criteria for a clear path foul, which sort of pretty much makes explicit that the clear path foul is the more serious offence, and the transition take foul is the easier one to call. A clear
Mhm.
path foul requires that there's no defender ahead of the offensive player when the contact is made, and that player is in control of the ball or the ball's being passed to them. So it happens more on sort of clear breakaways when the player who's gained possession is actually uh, sort of moving ahead of the defense, whereas transition take fouls tend to happen just after a turnover, and someone can get grabbed while there's all sorts of players all around or anywhere on the court.
Yeah.
That results in 2 free throws in possession, and the free throws have to be taken by the player who actually
Yeah.
was fouled. Um, In reality, the reason they brought the transition take foul in was because the clear path foul was sort of really unclear and difficult to call, and was resulting in video reviews that lasted for hours on end. So they brought the transition take foul in to make it an easier call and a quicker review if they decide they need to review it. And so the game just moves a little quicker. The clear
Hmm.
path foul was a disaster in this league for a lot of years. And yeah, to go back to
Yeah.
someone we were talking about a minute ago, Diana Taurasi was one of the queens of the transition take foul before the rule was actually in play. She used
Hmm.
to grab people a lot to stop breakaway plays because it was a common thing in Europe. They've
Yeah.
basically stolen it from Europe. It's the intentional foul call,
Yeah.
but they just call it something different over here.
Yeah. All right. Okay, another so now we're, going into questions that people asked us. So Janelle on Blue Sky asked us, what does it mean to have a mismatch? So I'll just kind of go in and say, when you're playing, against a team and you're picking defenders, often a mismatch either means that the defender of like the player is much taller than them, or they play a different position. So like, I don't know, just to do a very stark example, say for example, Jonquel Jones was defending Caitlin Clark. Like that is a huge mismatch, obviously, because Caitlin Clark is a point guard, Jonquel Jones is a center. And sometimes depending on personnel, you can kind of exploit mismatches a little bit. Like for example, when New York plays the Las Vegas Aces these days, usually Sandy Brondello will put Leonie Fibish on Chelsea Gray, which is a really great mismatch for New York because Leonie Fibish is a little bit taller. She's a great defender. And that just kind of stops Chelsea Gray from being able to pass as comfortably as she wants to, be able to shoot, be able to drive because you have someone much bigger in front of you. So, yeah, anything to add that I missed?
I mean, yeah, it usually happens when there's a screen and
Hmm.
defenders switch, and you
Yeah,
end up the most glaring ones are when a small player gets caught trying to defend a big player sort of under
yep,
the rim,
yep,
and yeah, you end up with sort of the other way around from your example, someone like
yeah,
Caitlin Clark trying to defend Jonquel Jones sort of under the hoop,
yeah,
and then yeah, you're just trying to back them down and score right next to the hoop.
yeah. Which obviously, if it's that situation, Jonquel Jones is probably just going to end up scoring because she's much taller. But yeah, so that's that. Another question M asked us, what would you like to see in the new CBA?
Oh. As you
You're
might
like,
as you might
yeah,
imagine with the stuff I deal with, you talk about these things a lot.
yeah,
I would like I mean, personally, I would like to see them clear up a lot of the stuff that's often unclear, in that
yeah,
things get shrouded in language that's too grey to actually be passed by a normal human, and then they have to have their lawyers decide what their actual ruling is on any of the rules. But to get more specific, I think they kind of helped themselves in the last one with a bit more of the salary stratification. What we used to have
mhm,
in this league was virtually everyone was either on the max or on a rookie scale. We do have a little bit more of something in the middle now,
yeah,
because of how they set it up in the last agreement. It sort
mhm,
of forced them to do that a bit. But what we also have in the last few years is players taking um, pay cuts in order to fit things under the salary
mhm,
cap. So what we're going to need, if they really want to get into this, is a new structure. I mean, the NBA has a salary has like a soft cap
mhm,
where sort of exceptions let you go over, and different rules let you sort of handle the cap in a much more complicated way. The
yeah,
WNBA rules have, for a long time, basically been simplified versions of the NBA's rules. They take the
yeah,
same thing and sort of try to break it down, which was fair because when they started writing these things, it was a lot of people who didn't have a lot of experience trying to run WNBA teams, and they tried to keep it as basic as they could while still keeping there be sort of fair rules. But everyone that they've hired now should know what they're doing. They should have managed
yeah,
to pass this down to more intelligent, more skilled front office personnel.
yeah,
So you can you can screw up the paper and start with a clean sheet if you really want to, but it's going to take a lot of time because most of the sort of recent CBAs have basically been slightly rewritten versions of the previous CBA,
Yeah.
and it would take a lot of time and a lot of work if they're just going to throw the old one in the bin and rewrite a new one from scratch. But at some point, they're probably going to have to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the soft cap, and I'm like, the NBA, obviously you can't just like spend the money and not have like a consequence. Like, you end up going into things like a tax, like there's a luxury tax in the NBA. If you go too far above the cap, then teams have to pay in extra. And so it's just like different. I would love to see a softer cap in the WNBA, because I mean, we saw instances even this season where like it was a matter of a couple $100, a couple $1,000, that teams were unable to sign a 12th player or sign a rookie. So, I mean, that would make it so much easier to build these rosters. Another thing that I would love to see in the new CBA is roster expansion, which I don't think is surprising to anyone. We talk about this all the time, how it's really hard to operate with 11 to 12 players. You think about rookies that aren't getting the shot, you think about injuries, you think about not being able to like have players in the system and then having to sign them to hardship contracts, and then they're just kind of thrown in. So I think like a great number would be like even just adding like a to 14 or 15, like not egregious. The NBA, I believe, is 15. But they also have like two-way players and the G League, like even just doing 13, 14, or even 14, 15, expanding the rosters. And I think, of course, like expanding to different cities and expanding in teams is important. We're going to get more roster spots regardless because of Toronto and Portland next year, on top of the fact that we got Golden State this year. But like, even so, like the cuts this year were ruthless, and I think expansion shouldn't mean that more, like just more rookies get a shot. I do think it should also mean that more international players can come play as well, which is what Golden State kind of prioritized in their roster building. And so adding, even one or two more roster spots would just give teams the opportunity to develop that young talent, to be able to, have rookies stay on and not have to flip flop from team to team to team for years until they find a spot. And even if, we did it in a way where maybe they don't necessarily travel with the team, maybe it's more of like a practice spot, maybe, there's so many different ways you can do it without having to fully commit to more money, more, roster spots, more resources being given to players. But yeah, I mean, that is something I would love to see. And I mean, there's so many different things too. I mean, before chartered flights became a thing last year, that was probably the biggest thing that people were talking about in the new CBA. But because of, just the situations that players were being put in last year, they ended up speeding up the chartered flight process. But obviously, we want to see that solidified in the CBA instead of just kind of like the handshake, word of mouth deal that they currently have going. And there's a lot, like when I looked up kind of the biggest um, things happening or the biggest points in this CBA negotiation, I mean, it was things like, family planning support for players, being able to give them resources to say, like, freeze their eggs or help them, be able to, um, plan their families without having to worry that their careers are in jeopardy, and, giving more resources to pregnant and postpartum players and stuff like that. And then there was also, more robust, like, benefits, more rules when it came to like personnel on teams and stuff like that. So there's a lot of little nitty gritty things that I think will come up in this CBA. And I mean, of course, there's the people out there like you, and we have a bunch of people on our team that really go through the CBA and become experts on it, which praise, because it's a huge, huge document. But yeah, so that is a pretty interesting thing to think about. And hopefully, I mean, the goal they were saying is for the CBA to be negotiated before the All Star break. I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen, but we might be hearing about these things sooner than we think, which is wild.
Yeah, I'm. I mean, my guess when people asked me was that they'll end up going beyond the end of the year,
Mm,
and it'll probably stretch into January, maybe early February, and then they'll have to sort of rework the calendar for next year. Hopefully, that's.
mm,
I mean, that's just from experience of how long the last couple have taken.
Yeah.
The Players Association have been saying they want to get it done by October, but
Yeah.
these negotiations always involve a lot of posturing from both sides. The league has to say we're willing to lock you out, and the players have to say we're willing to go on strike, whether either side is actually willing to do either of those things or not. Obviously, from an outside perspective, we desperately hope there isn't a work stoppage of any kind, because that will not be good for the league, whether on either side, whether the ownership
Yeah.
or the players. But
It's not good
yeah,
for you think about a stoppage of work, and it's not just the players, it's the team personnel, it's the league, it's us as media, like, of course, there's different rules based on what job you have, but at the end of the day, if there's no basketball happening, people are losing out on work, which obviously in times like now, we don't want to happen. So you want it to happen
absolutely.
for the players, obviously, because they deserve to be working and getting paid and all of that, but it also affects so many more people.
Yeah, I mean, I think Unrivaled has given the players an interesting sort of gain in their negotiating position, because they've shown
Mhm,
that we can make money, we can organize this league on our own.
mhm,
Um, we can still keep going without you guys. So
yeah,
that's put a lot of pressure on the league having, and
mhm,
the timing was obviously not a coincidence that Unrivaled was this year, just before they were going to
yes.
be negotiating a new landmark deal.
Exactly, yeah, and I mean, obviously, we knew they were gonna opt out of the CBA this year, but yeah, Unrivaled kind of it's funny because Unrivaled was announced quite a while ago, and then kind of last year, they're like, "Hey, we're doing it this year," and kind of it didn't seem fast just because, I don't know, they gave themselves a little bit of time, but yeah, the you were right, the timing of it to be able to use it as a bargaining tool, along with the fact that two-thirds of the league are free agents coming up. So, like, if it gets to that point, you're like, okay, we basically don't have any players signed. We need to do something. We need to, and so it's an interesting tactic when you think about it, um, because yeah, like we were saying, like nobody wants, especially with the boom of sports and how much like money people like companies are paying in terms of sponsorships and ads and media and stuff like that. Like it's not good for either side. Like we were saying to let this go on for so long. But anyway, the CBA is a very intricate thing, and it takes a lot of time to negotiate and make right. But anyway, we're gonna cut it off here for today. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to anybody who sent us a question. And we'll be back. I mean, our buddies here on Her Hoop Stats will be back tomorrow to chat a little bit more about the games this week. But we wanted to take advantage of having Richard here today to get into like the nitty gritty of a few of the most frequently confusing aspects of the league rules. So thank you so much for giving your insight, Richard. And if you're interested, if you're reading, watching this, listening to this, and you're interested about learning more about these things, check out Richard's work on Her Hoop Stats. He is, always updating and writing things and very technical when he comes to contracts and stuff like that. So check that out. Also check out herhoopstats.com. Not just stats, there's also, contract, CBA explainers, team cap sheets, et cetera, et cetera. Great resource if you're looking for all of that information. And of course, make sure to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to get the Her Hoop Stats podcast in your inbox every day of the week for this WNBA season. We're super excited to be giving you a bit more content. So I'm Chelsea Leite. This is Richard Cohen. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.